How's it going, everyone? This is Dixon of the Ultimate Gamer. I'm logging on, and today I want to go over a new reimagined console that I recently got on sale not too long ago. The Atari 7800 Plus. Now, a few years ago, Atari already redefined their legendary classic console, the Atari 2600, as the Atari 2600 Plus, which was a reimagining of the old console, except it works on modern televisions. And plus, something new they added with that one is I would say, forwards compatibility with 7800 games. And I already did a first impressions on the 2600 Plus console, which I got in the console about a few months after the console was released. And that was over 2 years ago. And since then, they released a 7800 Plus console and a 2600 Pac-Man Edition Plus console. And recently, I gotten a 7800 Plus console since it was on sale. Definitely don't want to pass that up. But here's the thing about both the 2600 Plus and 7800 Plus. Unlike the original hardware of the 2600 Plus can play 7800 games and the accessories, as well as the 7800 Plus can do the same with the 2600 games and the accessories. So, pretty much updated components in both of them can pretty much do both. So, there wouldn't be much of a difference between the two, unlike the original two, of course. But I definitely don't regret getting the 7800 Plus reimagined console, because it looks pretty badass. And if you're familiar with the original design for the 7800 consoles, between North American versions and PAL version, the reimagined console is the look of a PAL version, which actually looks better, by the way. And you notice how the controller that came with the reimagined console is the PAL exclusive controller that was actually more superior than the one that came with the North American version of 7800. I mean, the North American controller for the original 7800 looks more like a cross between the Atari 2600 controller and the 5200 controller, which the 5200 controller was a failure. And I'm assuming that 7800 controller was more of an improvement. But the PAL controller looked more like an actual game controller to fit in with the competition of the regular NES and the Sega Master System controller style. Getting an original 7800 PAL controller is extremely rare to come by. But however, you don't have to worry about that anymore, because you can get it here in North America for the reimagined consoles. Plus, it will also work on the old consoles as well too, as well as the 2600 Plus. But we'll get back to the controller in a little bit. Right now, let's take a look at the 7800 Plus console itself. Yeah, the thing's pretty light, and I do believe it's smaller than the 2600 Plus. Well, I haven't compared them both yet. I haven't digged out the 2600 Plus in a while. On the back of the console, you have the HDMI output and the USB output. That's for the adapter. And plus the button on the back, the switch on the back there is the screen resolution 4x3 and 16x9. And under the console, I think those bars are for the cable management that was on the original hardware, which needed the most. I'm pretty sure we can use it for this one. And on the front, there's the 2 difficulty switches and the 2 DB9 outputs. And of course, there's a power button, pause button, select button, and reset button. Yeah, they have the pause button on a console, which was actually still a new thing, but actually it made its debut on the Atari 2600, on the Atari 5200 controller. Now we're taking a look at the controller here. And these type of controllers are called the CX788 gamepad. Well, the reimagined controllers are called the CX78 Plus gamepads. And what's really better about the Reimagined as the CX70 Plus gamepads, they're wireless. Came with a USB charger cable plus 2 receivers, which are the DB9 connector and a USB connector. That's really awesome that it came with 2 options just in case if you want to play the controller off an emulator or something. You know what else is interesting about this controller, even back then? If you take a look at the D-pad, you see a screw in there. That's for the joystick attachment. They have this little joystick attachment thing you can screw into the controller. And you'll feel like you're playing, using the joystick on this controller. And that's optional, by the way. It doesn't work out for some games, though. I mean, sometimes they can be kind of stiff when using the stick. And sometimes it can be it's just more easier using the D-pad. But it's still a nice option to have. However, I do like this controller really well. But when comparing it with the NES controller, of course the NES controller is going to have its upper hand because it has a select and start button. But let's talk about the 2 red buttons on both of them. Well, first of all, the NES controller is the most well known for both North American and PAL regions. And definitely more used to the red buttons when using the right thumb for that controller. What about the 2 buttons on the Atari 7800 controller here? You can see they're a little bigger and they're kind of a little bit more sturdier from the looks of it. But they're a little bit too far apart compared to the NES controller, which makes it a little difficult to handle both buttons with one thumb when needed, like for a combination or if you're trying to do a running jump. Like with platformer games like Bentley Bear's Crystal Quest, you're going to have to use a bigger force with your thumb. And depending on how big your hand or thumb is, it can be really difficult to control both buttons on the Atari controller compared to the NES, which is really simple with any hand or thumb. And I have a big hand and a big thumb, and it's still a little tricky in somewhat ways to do a button combination for of the running jump for platformers compared to using the NES controller for their platformers. And I do have plans on getting another one of these controllers, by the way, whenever I get a chance. Because I like to have 2 of everything when it comes to console controllers. I also like to get the wireless 2600 controllers as well, which they also have individually at the Atari website for Reimagined consoles. But that'll be another day. Also, the 7800 Plus came with 1 game. Unlike the 2600, which came with 10 games in 1 cart, but 7800 Plus came with 1 game, Bentley Bear's Crystal Quest, which also came with an instruction manual, and you can also get this game individually too. Which was a game that's a supposed sequel to the 1983's Crystal Castles, which was a maze-like type of game where you had to collect all the dots on each level without getting hit by an enemy or etc. And of course it has Bentley Bear. That's what the character's name is. But this one is more of a sequel, or should I say maybe a spin-off, since this Crystal Quest game is a platformer. It was originally released as a homebrew back in 2014 on the Atari Age website. So this game never did exist during the 8-bit wars. But something tells me this would have been a nice competition during the 8-bit wars at least. Oh, however, Bentley Bear's Crystal Quest had become an actual packed-in game for the 7800 Plus, as well as selling it individually from their website. So it's now an official Atari 7800 game. And as you can see, I'm capturing the gameplay footage from my camera onto the TV instead of using a capture device because I'm having issues with the capture device for my consoles as of this time, and I need to get it updated. So I do apologize about this issue here. Now, this Bentley Bears Crystal Quest game is pretty interesting. It has a bunch of levels in it, and this is a game that should have existed back in the day. It would have been a study competition with Mario. I mean, it plays like a Mario game, at least. And this would have been a faithful competitor as well, from the looks of it. I would like to go into full more depth of this game once I get enough progress into it, as well as getting a better capture device so I can get a better experience. And what else did this Atari 7800 Plus console came with? Well, the basics, of course. An HDMI cable, a power USB cable to hook up to a USB AC adapter. Well, it didn't come with an adapter itself, but you can find a whole bunch of those these days, or USB outlets in the walls. And of course, the quick start on how you run the Atari 7800 Plus console itself. As well as a plastic top cover for the console, just in case if you want to store the console in the box somewhere. Now, with the Atari 7800 Plus bundle like this should have been the answer back in the late 80s when it comes to the 8-bit wars. I mean, it wouldn't be much of a difference back then because it wouldn't have today's components. And the wireless option would have been out of the question back then, which is fair enough. So, but it would have made more sense, though, to go with this bundle the way it is, though, as possible. Even though the original 7800 fell in third place, it still had a cult following after all these years, just like the 2600 did. And 2600 was still making games for their console during that time too. Out of all the video game consoles, the Atari 2600 console during its prime had the biggest lifespan out of all. And the original 7800 console had an average of 6 years, with approximately 40 games released for it during the time. Anyway, regardless of the popularity, the Atari still lives on, at least, especially for any consoles. And the reimagining of both the 2600 Plus and the 7800 Plus are definitely worth having in the collection. Even though they pretty much do the same, unlike both of the original consoles, they do, but these modern reimagined consoles pretty much do the same for the most part. Now, next thing I'm hoping Atari would do is actually give an Atari Lynx a Plus console or a portable. And more importantly, I also hope they give the same treatment for the Atari Jaguar and the Atari Jaguar CD as Atari Jaguar Plus for both cartridges and CD games. As well as having the later released Pro controller that has 6 buttons and shoulder buttons as the default controller. Now that would be really smooth. But right now I'm getting over my head, and that's pretty much all I have to say. The 7800 Plus, just like the 2600 Plus, definitely recommended to have in your collection. And I also want to say thank you all very much for watching. This is Dixon of the Ultimate Gamer. I'm logging off.